All right then.
Right.
Shall we, Mark?
Yes, Rafi, let's do it.
Good. All right. Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome you to our second webinar in this series of two webinars that started off last week with Nicholas and Giordano. We're very happy to today present you a case with JTI a project that we run over the last few months, a really interesting and exciting project that digs a little bit deeper into the whole community-based innovation topic within a larger group of people within a company. So a closed group crowdsourcing project. I would like to start off with introducing myself. My name is Rafi. For those who don't know me, I'm a senior innovation consultant with Hive Switzerland. And I've been working for 7 years now for Hive, starting off as a community manager back when I was still at the university. Very interesting then, also managing a bigger crowd, a bigger online crowd, and now managing all kinds of different projects with our customers, for example, JTI, a little bit more taking on the strategic hat. And now I would like Mark to ask to introduce himself. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Rafi, how are you doing? Thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak today. I hadn't realized we've known each other half your working life, and you've been working with JTI for nearly half your working life. So that's kind of interesting, yeah? So hi, everybody. I'm Mark Aspinall. I work in global innovation for marketing and sales at JTI. And I've spent 5 years in innovation, and I've always been excited by harnessing the power of the crowd. I'm quite a natural extrovert myself, and I do love to chat to people, and I'm excited by that whole creativity that gets generated with a crowd. I work in a heavily regulated industry, and so that means that we really can't go out and do crowdsourcing externally. Due to regulation and government laws. But that's why we wanted to do this project with our colleagues, which is 46,000 strong. So I am working in the front of innovation, so that's the trending area, the generating area, and sort of the prioritization area of innovation at JTI.
Cool, thank you very much, Mark. So I would like to start with two slides that you guys probably have already seen in the last webinar. Nicholas already presented them. I just think it's maybe a good time to remember these two slides to show you where we actually are with our global online ideation that we ran. So as you remember, probably from the last time, we have these kind of 4 different quadrants. So we can do global online ideation with externals, but we can also do it with employees, and we can use specific participants, usually smaller groups, and we can also use unspecified participants in larger groups. And that's exactly what we did with our internal campaign with JTI. So we're in the upper right quadrant here, and we were really using, as Mark said, 46,000 people within JTI as our larger group of people, of employees that took part in this huge project. So this is just to remember. If you want to go a little bit more into details, as I said, Nicholas presented this last week. You can still rewatch the recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. Now I would like to go a little bit more into detail and give you a kind of an overview about this global idea hunt, as we call it internally with JTI, this project. So as I said before, it's a global online ideation with over 45,000 people, so a huge amount of people all over the world. And our challenge was finding new ideas for traditional smoking products. So that's really basic for an online ideation, I guess. Finding new ideas is always one of the primary goals. But for us, it wasn't the only goal. It wasn't also not even probably the most important one. So we wanted to provide also a seamless, engaging, and very exciting user experience throughout the whole ideation process. That was really important for us. We wanted to create that mindset of open innovation, reaching, of course, high engagement. And for that, it was really important that we communicate very transparently throughout the whole process. And this included, oops, sorry, that was the wrong. That was really important so that we could also make a fast assessment of ideas and transform them into innovations faster. And we also had to keep in mind, remember, a lot of people. So there were also a lot of different stakeholders within JTI, 45,000 people. We had different markets, we had different cultures, we had different different managers, etc. And it had all to come together. So these were kind of the challenges that we were facing. Now, the approach that we were choosing is a campaign on an internal innovation management tool that was already in place with JTI before, and to run this over 6 weeks. This was all integrated into an agile innovation process, and we had to really frame the topic again. A lot of different people, a lot of different personalities around the globe. So to reach all the people, to have this really huge reach, we needed to optimize our topic framing. And we had a few experts that were commenting and evaluating all the submissions. More on that later. And also people working on the shortlisting and the selection of winners. And there was also a jury in place that makes sure that this process runs smoothly throughout the whole project. And we came out with a huge amount of ideas, so over 2,000 ideas that we could collect in the end. And I think this is even considering also the merged ideas. So really a huge amount of ideas over this 6-week period. We had almost 9,000 comments coming in. So this was also very important, not only ideas that were, of course, useful, but also the comments that we could use to enrich the ideas. Then over 5,000 evaluations that we did throughout the whole process. So people evaluating ideas, etc. And we had almost 7,000 participants. So a lot of these 46,000 people within JTI actually participated actively in this process. Mark, is there anything that you'd like to add on this?
Just that it was our first one. We were going away from traditional workshops where people gathered together and sort of got together and did this kind of traditional workshopping to get ideas. And we really wanted to prove that we could run this within the company and that it would actually bring value. So there's a fair bit riding on this one because we were like, for the first one, we had to make sure it was a good one. We had to really make sure that we had got as broad a reach as we possibly could. And as you can see there, we got nearly 7,000, as Rafi mentioned, 7,000 participants, which equals about 15% of our employees. So we think we did well on our first KPI, which was to encourage everybody or enable everybody to be able to participate. So I think that's important as well.
Thank you, Mark. Indeed, a very valid point. Cool. So now for the next few slides, we have picked our most important 3 pillars that we think were the biggest challenges or the biggest chunks of work that we did in this project. And one of the pillars, the first one is campaign communications. One will be ambassador program. We'll explain in a minute what that is. And the third one would be community management. And we would like to discuss these now in the next few minutes together. Starting with campaign communications, which was a huge part, of course, of this whole project. We started very early with the planning. There were a lot of channels that we had at our hand to use. We had a lot of different teams that needed to be communicated to, and we really managed to have our own design language or communication design language to use throughout the whole process. So you see on the right hand side the kind of path that we used here to really make this a unique experience for the users whenever we were communicating on our channels, like Workplace, for example, that we used to reach a broader base of people, or of course also via the other tools that we used, email, Teams for internal communication, or the tool itself, of course, when it comes to informing the submitters about the status of their ideas, etc. So I would like to make this a Q&A with you, Mark, starting with the first question. What, in your eyes, what do you think was the biggest challenge when it comes to campaign communication?
Well, for us, I mean, I honestly think it was language, because as we've already just sort of touched on briefly, we're a global company. We're in over 80 countries, and not everyone speaks the same language. So for us, it was really important that somehow we would find a way to make our comms talk to everybody. And if we think about what we've just seen, and you've given the example of the comms that we show on the right with the design language and so on, what we created and what we made for the Global Idea Hunt was a whole series of assets that markets could make themselves or change themselves or make it local. So getting this language and talking to people in the right language was always going to be the biggest challenge for us. And we always found that when we were talking to different people, even using the same words don't convey the same meaning. So it was never a case of us in HQ, because that's where I am, just sort of sending out materials, because the words and so on don't make the same communication that we wanted to get, driving the same sort of engagement or emotional impact that we wanted earlier on. So for us, I have to say, I think it was language that was the biggest thing there, roughly.
Okay, and you're talking about engagement, right, over the whole process. How did you keep this community engaged over 6 weeks?
It's really interesting, because we did this through a lot of different areas, but it was localization. When I talk about localization, what I mean is we had, and I know we'll touch on this in a minute, but we had people in the markets who were helping us, and they used our assets, so the comms that we made, that we put together and that we created, and they put them together in their own way. Because one of the things is that even though this whole project was set up by the HQ and the senior VP of marketing and sales, local people really don't care. What they're interested in is kind of being seen by their boss, or looking good in front of the next boss up. So talking to someone who's miles away in Geneva in Switzerland isn't something that really excites them a lot. So we had to do this kind of localization, which enabled people to do their own campaigns. And one of the things with this one, which is where it's got very exciting, is you actually see different markets create amazing campaigns for themselves locally. So not only would they translate the language, which is what we saw before, because it was a challenge for us, but they would do that locally. And often a lot of the campaigns and materials that they created were in 2 languages or bilingual, so that you'd have local language and English in a lot of places that we were doing this. And this is where it got really exciting to keep them engaged, because you could see we would have different markets try different things. So each one of our markets was able to localize the materials that we created. And some, for example, gave anybody who submitted an idea a €10 Amazon voucher. Now for us, that was more about quantity, not so much quality but it still engaged their local people. And then there's other markets. We had Jordan, for example, doing an amazing job of bringing in the people in their factory and actually engaging with them and helping run a competition, a local competition, for the best ideas that they could find. And all during this, these guys were doing it locally. So we would work with the teams to help them with their assets that they would use, but we would also check in with these guys to see what they were creating and to share back. And that was always part of the exciting part for me, was to see what was coming from our people across the world as we built up an amazing ambassador program for all of this to do this creation.
Perfect leading over to the next slide, Mark. the ambassador program, which indeed, as you said, is a huge advantage in this project, I think.
Yeah.
We really managed to have our local champions who helped us a great deal, organizing not only communication, but also, organizing all kinds of events to get more ideas into the tool. Of course, we supported them with different assets that they could use, idea templates or stuff like that. But we were surprised about actually how they managed to really do their own stuff and their own initiatives, which we knew we couldn't do because they know just their people better, right?
Yeah.
So one question that I have to ask here is, how did you choose these people? How did you choose the ambassadors?
Well, we're a bit lucky because it was the marketing and sales team who was running this program. That's the team I'm from. And we were able to ask our markets to nominate a person. And it was really important that this person that they nominated was someone who was actually going to be dynamic and so on. So what we did was we sent to each of the markets a kind of a brief about what the person who was going to be an ambassador should look like. So we wanted someone who was dynamic, someone who had a good network, someone who was creative, and someone who would be willing to put a lot of energy into being an ambassador for us. So we kind of wrote this cheat sheet, or a brief, if you like, about what the type of person that we would want. And we also mentioned, which was quite clear, because in a company like ours, you can't just take people and not say for how much time you need. So we had to give them an estimation, the directors of each of the markets, an estimation of how much time and hours that we would take from their working days during this whole period. And so we found that this was the best way to get really exciting people. And they were chosen locally, and then they supported us for the whole period.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they basically were chosen
by
their...
I like the word, it's called voluntold. They were voluntold to do this, yeah.
Exactly. So how did you keep them engaged, actually?
Well, that was one of the really exciting pieces, because we didn't realize how big this would be. What we did was we created, as you mentioned earlier, we had a channel for teams, which is where we could talk to all of our ambassadors. We called this our ambassador network. But also we had a weekly, two times on a Thursday. So we captured different time zones. So for Asia and Latin America, we had these network weekly calls. And so for us, what these were very exciting was because we would not only share back what was happening in the next week and what we were asking people to do, but we would ask the markets or the ambassadors to share what they'd been up to that week. So it was kind of like a very dynamic sharing session as well. And this was, sorry, there's a very loud noise going on outside window. I'm not sure if you know it. I'm just going to shut it. Just get a truck out there. So yeah, this is what was happening for us. We would have these ambassador weekly meetings, and these guys would share back with us. And we were surprised. We were really surprised by the quality and the level of campaigns that the guys were putting together. At the beginning, we were kind of thinking, oh, it'll be just, someone will change some words and maybe make it like that. But it really wasn't. We had, for example, we had Germany making podcasts. We had Jordan making videos with their factory guys and making competitions. So keeping them engaged by sharing back and sharing what others were doing was one way that we managed to do that very well, I think.
Cool, thank you very much. There would be so much more that we could talk about when it comes to the ambassador program. Nevertheless, I would like to move on to the next slide if I'm looking at the time. So the next one would be the community management. Yeah, community management is of course important. You already heard that last week with Nicholas. When we're doing online ideation, we need to read the ideas, we need to comment, we need to people to know, you know, someone's there and actually reading the stuff I'm putting my time and effort in. So in order for me to do it again the next time. So Mark, you're basically a one-man show within JTI to organize this whole innovation process and this project. How did you do that?
Well, I've got to say it was pretty difficult because at the time, what we had was, what we did was we engaged some community managers because we'd run a pilot earlier. And what we wanted to do was make sure that in this pilot, we knew we were going to need people because we wanted to be transparent. We had to build trust with our teams that we were going to work with. And we were going to do that. We had to answer every single idea that got submitted. We had to check all of those ideas and we had to sort of categorize those ideas. So by building this trust, it was super important that we had support to do that because as you said, Rafi, I'm just a one-man band. There are other people in my team, but they work on the sort of development side. And so it was never going to be just okay for one person to do it. So as you know, we engaged with Hive to support me in this area so that we could write back to each and every person that submitted an idea. Thanks very much for your idea, because we would lose them if we lost their trust. And it was during this kind of period that we actually got to have daily meetings with the community managers. These kind of daily meetings were what kept us in touch with what was going on. And by doing that, we were able to make sure that we got to be able to sort a lot of the ideas as well. And that was also very exciting for us because what we would bring to this community managers is in the daily meetings, we would ask my team to turn up and to suggest some ideas, to actually comment back. So it's not just the community managers, but it was the guys from my team that were also doing that. And we would go then and sort out these ideas every single day. So we had the community managers and they were really vital during all of this to make sure that what we were doing is looking after those ideas and building that trust. Because if we didn't have the trust, we knew from a pilot we'd run the year before, people wouldn't be wanting to come back. They wouldn't want to support us again in doing their, in submitting ideas. And we got a lot of feedback from our ambassadors about that one as well. They were always very keen for us to make sure that we were answering every question, following up on all of the different ideas, even when we merged ideas and so on. You had to tell everybody what you were doing and be transparent about it. Because if you weren't, they honestly, we would lose the guys for the next rounds or the next exciting times that we wanted to do. And we have to be very cognizant of that, because if we don't do this properly in the first one, the one that we've just done, we know that we would get less of a response next time. And from work we've done before, you know that it's very hard if you lose people once to get them back. It's much easier to build the trust and hold the trust than if you lose it. So community management for us was sort of a really big deal, and we did need a bit of support for that one.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much, Mark. So to end this presentation here, we prepared a slide here with the most important key takeaways for us that we've learned in this global online ideation. And the first one would be communication is key. So we learned plan ahead, start very early with the communication, not only communication to the whole group of participants, but engaging the ambassadors very early and taking them into consideration, sending reminders and keep keep engaged. The second one is building a strong network. So using existing networks that you already have, using local market power, using local marketing knowledge, and engage locally. A third one would be giving feedback. So let your community know as much as possible, not only about the general stuff around the project, like why do you collect the ideas and why, or what's the general question, but also how are we actually going to look at the ideas? What are we going to do with the ideas further where in the process? And comment on the ideas, as Mark just said before, very, very important. And last but not least, we didn't talk so much about incentives in this round, but be smart about them. For our use case, we saw quality definitely before quantity. This also means avoiding monetary incentives. Remember, we had a lot of different markets, we had a lot of different people, and I mean, it's definitely not the same 200 francs in one market than it is in another. So you need to keep that in mind when you're putting out incentives. So for us,
for this one, Rafi, we were really quite strong about it. Although I mentioned a market which did try and just pay for every person's idea, which wasn't great. What we did do though was a lot of recognition, and I think that's super important. It may not always be about monetary incentives, but doing recognition is super important here. We ran a couple of prizes for things like best drawings. Maybe they're not even related to the idea generation itself, but some people did fantastic drawings and so on, and we wanted to recognize those. So not only the best ideas, but things that can come with them, because we asked everyone to provide illustrations of the ideas that they had. And we also ran another thing called the Most Valuable Player, the MVP Award. And this was really interesting for us because there were some people that really just woke up and they became amazing, more than ambassadors. They were like generators of goodwill for this whole program. And we found that we've had people who just suddenly became amazing contributors, not only in the number of ideas, but the comments, and being very positive and feeding back. Because one of the things we wanted to try and do was to build, of course, on the ideas that were coming in, to co-create, to co-develop together. And by having these MVP people, these people who were speaking up, we could see that the ideas could be co-created and developed a little bit stronger and further. And so we made sure we recognized those people as well. And honestly, it's not big recognition. I mean, it's just to make sure that there's a small certificate that goes out, a little bit of an introduction to who the person is, what they've done, and how they've contributed to our whole program. That was super important.
Cool, thank you very much, Mark. So yeah, basically now we have reached the end of our presentation. We don't want to stop here though. I already want to thank you, Mark, for taking part here in this webinar and presenting your thoughts and helping me out presenting this very, very interesting case. But right now we have still time to answer your questions. We can also overdo a little bit the time. We don't have to stop at 30 minutes. But for those people who already need to leave or want to leave, thank you very much for being here with us. It was a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, hope to see you again soon.
Thanks. Thanks everybody for attending. And if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer those from what we managed for our global idea hunt.
So I will now check the Q&A section. We have no question yet.
So we have a question from Kate. Did you implement any of the ideas proposed? What was the process for this? So yes, Kate, we were running a bit short of time, so I kind of skipped some of the sorting and evaluation part that we did earlier. What happened for us, we kind of had a funnel, and it was a pretty big job actually, because we had over 2,000, as you saw, 2,000 ideas. And what we did was we had 3 rounds of evaluations. And our innovation management tool was very helpful for this. You can make sure that each of those rounds was evaluated by different people. So in the beginning, our first round was our own team. Then we had our brand groups to look at ideas. They did a round of evaluations. And then finally, we had our technical teams. So our research and development and our global supply chain, which is the factory guys, the engineers, look at those ideas. And by the end, we got down to 60 ideas, Kate. And at the moment, those 60 ideas were then sent out to our consumer research, and they've only just they're about to come back in the middle of this month. So it's taken us quite a long time to do that funnel. But at the minute, the last 60 ideas that we have that came out of the 2,200 are now at consumer research. We had to create consumer research boards and copy and visualizations for those ideas, but that's where we are right now with that. But most of the evaluating was done in-house by specialist teams. So I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Mark. You guys can just in addition, you can add your questions to the Q&A section or to the chat, whatever is better for you guys. But I see we already have the second question and the third one from Adrian. How will we continue based on the learnings and effects achievements?
There were a ton of learnings that we took from the actual ideation itself, which we will reuse. Of course, the ambassador program was enormously important, but it's also trying to sell that into a business is actually a little bit of a tough sell, because it's, well, why do you need all of this people doing things across the world? Isn't it a bit much, and so on? So those learnings is to carry on with that ambassador program. We find for us internally, it worked really well. And for the achievements, we have struggled a little bit, I'll be honest, about keeping up with all of the different communications that we need to do to all of the different people. As you saw, there was over 6,000 people that participated. And so getting our comms right after the event has been an area where we would probably put more effort next time to be more prepared, because for us, it's been quite challenging to keep everybody updated. And that's what we do find sometimes, is we've got some feedback from our own people is, okay, what stage are you at? What's happening? I haven't heard from you for a week or two. And I would have thought personally that, okay, once it's over, we just do a couple of updates every sort of other month and people will be happy. But quite frankly, that's not it. They want to be keep them informed almost as much as when they were working when we were doing the campaign. So that's an area where we definitely want to work on.
Cool, thank you. So another question would be, how does JTI manage to start such a program, which seems to be a big initiative and change?
So
another question for you, I guess.
Yeah, well, no, it's kind of interesting because we have a pipeline of ideas that we must keep filled. So our role in the global innovation team is to keep the pipeline of new ideas, new features for the teams full. And then how do we determine what do we need to put in this pipeline? For that, we have focus territories, innovation focus territories. And there are 4. So it covers things like sustainability, which is, of course, a big one for everybody. Value for money, which is large. Taste and flavors, as you've already seen, which is massive as well. And considerate smoking. How do we make smoking more considerate for both either people or for others? And what we look at is, in our pipeline that's not full, which one of these focus territories is missing ideas? And that will be how we start to initiate a change. So for example, if we had no taste and flavor ideas, or very few taste and flavor ideas in our pipeline, we would then think to run our next online ideation on that topic. So the one that we've shown you today was very broad, as Rafi said at the very beginning, because what we were proving was not the ideas that we were going to get in, more so we could reach everybody and that we could make sure that everybody got to participate. On our future ones, they'll be far more targeted, because this was not a targeted program, and it will be targeted to fit, as I said, keeping our pipeline full in one of those 4 innovation focused territories.
Oh, thank you, Mark, for answering this question. We have another one in the Q&A section. I just see. Amazing presentation. Thank you. You're welcome. How big was your budget for the initiative to get a first impression? All right.
That's kind of Alexander, that's kind of what do they call commercially sensitive answer. But what I'll tell you is that compared to our previous way of doing innovation, it was about 1/3 smaller. So for example, running our previous innovations would take a lot of people, 60 people, put them in a city like Copenhagen or London, using a big agency to do lots of research and lots of preparation to make things stimulating and to take these 3 days. So that's a 3-day workshop with some serious firepower. And I can tell you that doing it online has produced more ideas than those old ways of doing it ever did. And it's 1/3 cheaper for us. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're after, but that one's kind of commercially sensitive, I think. I'm not sure I should be giving that away.
You have all the right to not to do so, Mark. Thank you. Is there another question? I think we answered all of the questions before, yes. So no new questions in the chat, no new questions in the Q&A. All right, so I think this is it, guys. If you still have questions, of course, feel free to reach out. You have our contacts in the first slide. We're happy to take your questions also via email. So feel free to contact us.
Please feel free. If you have a question for me or something, pass them to the team at Hive, and I'm sure they'll pass them on to me and I can answer them for you if you think of something later.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. So in this case, thank you again, Mark, for being part of this webinar. And thank you all for being here and listening to us. Yeah, and have a great rest of the week and stay innovative, I would say.
Thanks, Rafi. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.